I had a genetic counselor that was guiding me through the process, connecting me with testing resources. And so I'd met with her a few times. And so once I actually got tested for BRCA, she called me one morning with the results. And I remember like very distinctly, she started off the conversation with, "I'm really sorry. I know this isn't the news we wanted to hear, but," and then proceeded to tell me that I tested positive for BRCA. And the thing that really stuck out to me in that moment was I never told her necessarily that I wasn't hoping for a positive result. I never communicated that I did or did not want BRCA. I remember like in our first few like introductory sessions, she'd ask me like, "Are you feeling anxious? Like, it's normal to feel anxious. It's normal to feel nervous." And I was just very plain with her from innate wisdom. I'm not, honestly. I'm accepting whatever it is my body has to tell me, and I'm not looking at it from a fearful lens. Instead, I'm just kind of seeing it as information about myself. And so I thought it was really interesting. And I've heard this like response too from like family and like some of the friends that I told about this. Their immediate response is to say something like, "I'm so sorry. That's really awful. Like, that's really bad news." I feel like that definitely is a judgment that I'm experiencing about something that, like we said before, I physically could not control. It's just a fact of my body and how it was built.
Are you using your operating system any differently now as these responses are coming at you from the outside versus in the past when these kind of responses on the outside were said to you, were communicated to you? Did you use your mind any differently then?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about, there was definitely a big difference between how I approached it in the past and how I approached it this recent time around. I think like when I was younger, like as you mentioned before, like I was aware that breast cancer was a big thing in my family, understood the BRCA gene. When I was younger, like high school or so, like I would do a lot of Googling. I knew like my mother's response was to be not super comfortable with talking about it. Like she would kind of say like, "It's not the best thing to have happen to you," and all these things about how it's like, honestly, like just put it bluntly, a cancer sentence. That was kind of the idea that I feel like I heard a lot, or at least I understood about BRCA at that time. And I do a lot of Googling, go to like random medical web forums of people talking about BRCA and talking about how it's like a guaranteed cancer risk and that it's this awful, unlucky burden that you have on yourself. And I think that's a lot of what contributed to my avoidance of the topic entirely for a lot of my life. I'm 22 right now, and that's still like young to get tested for BRCA, or at least what people say is young to get tested for BRCA. But up until this point, like I had no interest in ever like looking at that, getting that information. I would think about BRCA sometimes, like it would pop into my head and I would just drive myself into anxiety and worry and fear, make up all these horrible like nightmares about being young and getting cancer and dying and all of this very dark stuff. But now I definitely shifted my perspective a lot. I've built up a lot of internal resilience, first of all, about not necessarily taking to heart everything that everyone says about everything.
Could we stop and look at that for a moment? When you say you've built up a lot of internal resilience, can you very simply break down what does that mean?
Yeah, honestly, it was just practicing psychological listening and just getting really comfortable with going into that instead of thinking. I think it was a process of me like recognizing and being more aware when I was going into thinking, when I was feeling darker, less light feelings, and then taking steps to psychologically listen, taking steps to just take in information, factual information.
So in your therapy, mental health counseling grounded in the 3 psychological principles, you were afforded the opportunity to be introduced to psychological listening.
Yeah.
You were afforded the opportunity to have exercises and practice it. So as you were being exposed to this knowledge, what happened inside of you regarding understanding this capability inside? Just keep it really simple.
the outside is one thing, but I think on the inside, like I feel like I've just been able to connect more with myself, like connect more with my innate wisdom and make decisions from that place. And I feel like it ultimately enables me to do more of what's right for me instead of what people tell me, or like what I have believed in the past, or like the fears and the anxieties that I've made up about certain things. Hello everyone, this is Ellie with the Got Your Back podcast. Today is the second part of Judgment, and we're going to be talking about things we can't control. Been an area for me to learn more about just through various biological events that I've experienced, or just navigating through life and not being able to control what people do or say. But I think the beauty in things that you can't control is that it really gives you an opportunity to reflect inwards and realize what you can do for yourself in those moments.
Hi, I'm Faith Escudero, licensed mental health counselor, licensed school psychologist, licensed special ed teacher, and elementary education teacher. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am the host of Got Your Back podcast along with Ellie.
And I am your junior host. I have been an active client of mental health counseling for about 2 years now. I'm finishing up my 5th year at Northeastern University, and I'm excited to get into it today.
I would like to do a shout out to Ritu while she's not here with us physically, to recognize her contributions in the first 5 podcasts. They've been great contributions. We really appreciate it. We're in for a treat with our topic today, things we can't control and judgment around that. Let's dive in. In the past podcasts, we have touched upon an essential capability inside called psychological listening. And in the first 5 podcasts, the exercise usually happened at the end because we spent quite a bit of time introducing the capability and giving some basic understanding about the importance of the capability. So today, it makes sense. We're going to start with the psychological listening exercise, and then we'll chat a bit about it afterwards, why it's such an important capability to cultivate inside, to experience greater levels of understanding about it. So let's begin with the psychological listening exercise. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, please join us in this exercise. We're going to be psychologically listening through movement. So what you're going to be observing and noticing what's happening in your body as you complete the movements. We're going to start with the upper body, and let's begin with our neck. We're going to start doing slow neck rolls where we're moving our left ear to our left shoulder. We're bringing our chin to our chest. We're moving our right ear to our right shoulder. Nice, slow neck rolls. And you're just observing and noticing the sensations in your neck as you're moving and stretching your neck. Left ear to left shoulder, chin to chest, right ear to right shoulder, and then your head tilted back. Now let's go in the other direction. Head, chin up to the ceiling, right ear to right shoulder, chin to the chest, left ear to left shoulder. And just go nice and slow and observe what's happening in your neck. Now you can just let your head still. Give it a little shake back and forth, just a little shake. Observe and notice what's happening as you move your neck. We're going to move on to the shoulders. Slow shoulder rolls. So observe and notice as you lift your shoulders up to your ears, and then you stretch your shoulders back as far as they can, and then you let them drop down in the socket. Bring them forward, squeezing them forward, bringing them up to your ears, and then squeezing your shoulder blades together. Let them drop down. Observe and notice what's happening in your shoulders as you do these slow, intentional shoulder rolls. Now bring your shoulders in the opposite direction. Observe and notice as you lift your shoulders up, you squeeze them to the front, you let them drop down, you squeeze them to the back, squeezing your shoulder blades together up towards your ears, and just like roll them slowly. One more time, observe and notice, roll them. Now just shake out your shoulders. Observe and notice as you shake out your shoulders, how they're moving, what it feels like in there. Lift our arms, stretch our left arm to the left wall, our right arm to the right wall, and feel them stretching. Keep your chest lifted, your shoulders back, and just feel the tension in your arms, the strength in your arms. Now, flex your wrists. So you're pushing your palms towards the wall and then pointing your fingers down and stretching the front of your hands. Point the fingers up towards the ceiling and now down. And let's do just some slow wrist rolls. Just notice what it feels like in your wrists. Now go in the opposite direction. And you can feel the strength in your shoulders and throughout your arms as you're stretching them towards the wall. Bring your fingers out, stretch your fingers, just wiggle them. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Observe and notice what's happening in your fingers. Observe and notice what's happening through your hands and your wrists. Now let's flex at the elbow. You're bringing your hands towards your chest. Now extend them back out. Bring your hands towards your chest and extend them back out. Observe and notice what's going on throughout your arms, throughout your elbows, throughout your upper arm, throughout your lower arm. Now you can drop your arms and just shake it out, shake it out, shake it out, shake it out. Observe and notice what's happening in your upper body. We're going to stretch out our waist. While you're in your chair, you want to keep your hips still. And what you're going to be doing is rolling at your waist. And just go slow. So you're leaning towards the right, you're leaning towards the back, you're leaning towards the left, you're leaning towards the front. And you're just doing waist rolls, going around in circles. Observe and notice what's happening in your waist. Now go in the opposite direction. Waist rolls, going to the right, going to the front, going to the left, going to the back. Now just wiggle around in your chair, just loosen up your waist. Observe and notice what's happening through the sides of your body and through your chest and how it affects your shoulder area. Now let our body be quiet. Observe and notice, does your upper body feel any different as it's just quiet? Ellie, what's happening inside? The psychological feeling or what's happening inside your head? Is there any kind of difference now in this moment?
You know, I feel a lot more awake, actually. I was noticing, like, I just feel more, I think, like, the word is present, but I think to get a little bit more detailed about that, I just feel more alert, but not like in like a nervous way or anything. I just feel more like ready to take on this episode. I feel more ready to talk about this topic, ask questions, be present.
What's the psychological feeling inside right now?
Definitely just like grounded. I feel very secure right now. I feel very motivated, determined.
Does your head feel the same as before the exercise?
I think it still feels clearer. Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm clear.
It's always now, 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 now. In the now, we can either choose to use our operating system inside to think, or we can choose to use our operating system where we psychologically listen. And that's just to experience whatever is happening now, receive it, have a totally open mind, just to observe and notice whatever is going on in the now through any biological sense. It could be through our sense of sight. It could be through our biological hearing, noticing physical sounds. It could be through our sense of smell, just noticing smells. It could be through our sense of taste, where we just notice what's happening inside of our mouth. We did psychological listening as we did a physical movement activity. Some people call it moving meditation. All it means is your biological body is moving, but psychologically, you're just receiving, you're just experiencing, you're just noticing what's happening in your body. When we're psychologically listening, is we're putting down the power thought. Our operating system has 3 powers in it, and the one power is called thought. It is a psychological element. It's like a magical paintbrush inside, and it's our ability to create. When we put this power down in live time, that's where we're psychologically listening. We're just experiencing, we're just observing, we're just noticing. And when we put that power down, the power thought, what naturally happens is our awareness increases in live time. It upgrades in live time. That's that feeling of more alertness. That's where you're like the colors in the room or your clothes are more vivid, or the smells in the area that you're sitting in are more vivid, or you just pick up more easily bodily sensations. Right now, I feel more of the coolness in the room. It's more clear to me like that there's a coolness that's happening in the room. When we psychologically listen, that's when we're allowing ourself and our operating system to reset, to reboot inside, where we're just experiencing what's happening in the now. We're not doing any thinking about it. We can do this any moment, anytime, this psychological listening. It's also a really important first step, accessing so many higher leveled psychological capabilities that we have inside. The other thing that's really important to understand about psychological listening is it's actually part of what is called self-regulation. And I'm talking about psychological self-regulation. So there are moments, every one of us is using our power called thought, where we are reacting to whatever is going on. And that's when you're living in an insecure feeling. That insecure feeling could be anger. That insecure feeling could be annoyed. That insecure feeling could be resentment. That insecure feeling could be guilt. It could be embarrassment. It could be anxiety. It could be feeling overwhelmed or panic. Those feelings are originating from picking up our power called thought, and we're actually using it to react to whatever is going on in live time or even inside of our head. So when we choose to go into psychological listening, what we're doing is independently, psychologically moving ourselves into a calm, resilient state. We are consciously allowing our operating system to be in an optimal state, to hit that reset button. And this is going within and using our operating system consciously to live in a secure state, a healthier state, a more productive, proactive state of mind. The opposite we do when we have a lower level of consciousness is we can have a habit to go to the outside and depend on the outside to temporarily make ourselves feel better. In previous podcasts, Ritu pointed out that's when we pick up an alcoholic drink, and not all the time when we pick up an alcoholic drink, but there are moments when we feel very unsettled inside. We feel in a heightened, insecure state, and a person can find themselves saying, oh, I need a drink to relax. I need a glass of wine to relax. What they're using is this thing on the outside to temporarily calm themselves down or clear their mind. But actually in those moments, The alcohol could be creating more cloudiness in the head because it's a chemical. That's when people might pick up a cigarette. That's when people might pick up the phone and try to call a friend and start talking to a friend or a relative, or go out and socialize. Those are activities on the outside. Some moments we're using those activities, we're depending on those activities to let ourselves feel in a better state. And this is where addiction begins, is where we less consciously use our mind, we less consciously understand our capabilities inside and how our operating system works, and we depend on the outside to temporarily make us feel better. When we have a greater level of understanding of our operating system, when we cultivate a greater levels of mental health, we understand inherently from facts. Instead, we can go to the inside and we can start using our operating system more consciously. We can start accessing these natural capabilities, psychological capabilities we are built with when we're born. And throughout entire our life, they're in their capabilities we have. Instead, consciously start going into psychological listening. It takes a number of moments, but we can go into a psychological listening state where those anxious thoughts, those insecure thoughts, those thoughts of boredom, those thoughts of guilt, those thoughts of shame, those thoughts of embarrassment, we're allowing them to leave. We're allowing them to dissipate. We're allowing our mind to clear. This is our 6th podcast. And since we've discussed psychological listening somewhat in the previous ones, it made sense to start this podcast practicing that capability, understanding it a little bit deeper. So we're already in a healthier state of mind as we listen to this podcast and take in the facts that are being discussed. Is going to be super helpful for you to listen and understand at greater levels.
I have a quick question, Faith.
Sure.
I was wondering if you could go a little bit into detail about the difference between like less consciously reacting to something versus more consciously like responding to an event.
Great question. So we have this powerful operating system inside, and we're using it every single moment from the time we're born until the time we die. So throughout our entire life, every live moment, we're using this operating system. When we understand at greater levels, we have it inside and how it works, we just more naturally use it consciously. For example, I was riding my bike in the bike lane, coming home from a doctor's appointment. Biologically, I'm hearing this honking, and it's becoming more clear psychologically. Something is approaching that's not right. I just was observing and noticing the biological sounds, the honking. And then as I'm observing and noticing it, I used my power thought to say, what's the right thing to do? Independently, psychologically, what I saw from clarity was just get off of the bike lane, start walking on the sidewalk. It made sense. I developed more awareness, like what is going on before I move forward with my bike in the bike lane. The light turned red. I'm not using my power thought to judge it, to be anxious, to start going into a lot of fearful thinking. I'm just observing and noticing what's going on. It became apparent to me that at least one of the cars, the man was very, very distressed. He was yelling, screaming out of his car windows. He was honking his horn. There was something very much wrong going on inside of him. Because I was using my operating system consciously, I was in a very calm, grounded state inside. I could feel it. Because of the level of mental health I've cultivated, psychologically listening has become very natural. The guy was yelling very personal, nasty things towards me, the person on the bike. So if I less consciously used my mind, my operating system, I would have more easily picked up the power called thought. My magical paintbrush would have more easily made up a lot of insecure thoughts about this guy yelling directly at me and saying these very nasty things to me. It could have been I get angry, yelling back at him. All of those are thoughts, and all of those are being created with my operating system, with my power called thought. I could have started making thoughts up where I'm really scared, that this guy's really scary. I could have made up a whole bunch of different things with my power called thought. And because of what I've learned, the mental health I've cultivated, I was able to access these more sophisticated capabilities very simply, very naturally, and just be in a very resilient state. And what came to mind was to say to the guy to please calm down, because I have an understanding. When we're really angry, our heart rate increases, it accelerates. I just had an inner knowing his blood pressure was really high. Plus, when a person's angry like that, that's a greater possibility he's going to make a mistake, crash his car, crash into someone. First of all, kept myself safe. And then second of all, I consciously responded, trying to encourage him to calm down. That's what just made sense. When the light turned red and he took off and he was still cursing profusely out the car, what came to my mind was to pray for him. And I asked God to help him because he appeared to be very troubled. This is coming from innate wisdom, common sense, resilience, a secure state. And it's because I've learned to use my power called thought much more consciously. I've had a lot of realizations about it. And so I just naturally use it more consciously. Is this answering your question, Ellie?
Yeah, I mean, from what I'm understanding, being able to respond to something consciously versus reacting, going into anger or taking it really personally. He's attacking you specifically because of who you are or whatever. Instead of going into those insecure reactions, I feel like what you're saying and getting at is that the choices that you were able to make in that situation were both a lot easier on you. You weren't putting yourself through that level of anger and insecurity, or weighing yourself down with all these thoughts of what's wrong with me. But it also allowed you to kind of look out for him, be more compassionate in that situation, trying to make a decision that was in both of your best interests instead of two people just getting angry at each other and fighting, and no one really makes it out of that in a better feeling.
What I've realized over time is the way nature built our operating system, nature really came up with this sophisticated design. When we use it consciously, that's where we are able to love unconditionally. I'm not thinking positively. I'm not making up these imaginary positive thoughts. I'm using my mind where I'm seeing from an objective level of understanding, universal facts. Oh, this is what's going on right now. The way the guy is using his operating system, he's just causing himself a lot of distress. It really has nothing to do with me at all. It would have been anybody on a bike or anybody he considered to be in his way that he would have been yelling at. It wasn't me personally. It's just how he's come to use his mind. You're on a lot more solid ground inside. Your level of awareness is much greater, just like we experienced in the psychological listening exercise. You don't take things as personally. When you take things personally, that's using the power thought and seeing from a subjective level of understanding, which is the opposite of facts. Number one, you're in a healthier state and a healthier feeling psychologically. Your biology is healthier. Your heart isn't racing. Your stomach isn't doing somersaults. So your body's functioning optimal level, reducing the possibility of sickness happening. And on top of that, you're able to connect more easily, more simply with other human beings, even when they're not in a good state. It's the recipe for world peace. It's the recipe for when leaders are disagreeing, leaders of countries or institutions, for them to learn to use their mind consciously, they could spend more time connecting, understanding one another than creating these civil wars or attacks on other countries or big, huge disputes and arguments. So it's really about learning to use your mind more consciously.
That's a good segue into the topic of the episode, because that was a thing that you couldn't control. He was coming from wherever he was coming from and chose to start yelling at you for like you didn't ask for that.
He was saying very, very graphic insults to me. He was just attacking and going metaphorically for the jugular. So I'm saying when we use our mind consciously, we really just inherently from inside can actually be very calm and clear. I didn't even know that situation was going to happen. With all the mental health I cultivated in previous moments, it allowed me to be able to do that in that moment. And you're right, that is a perfect segue for us to go deeper into our topic today, and that is things we cannot control. It was totally out of my control that someone would be driving in a car and really be in a bad state. Is there anything we can do about that? And in the case there is, what can we do about this? A lot of social examples, which I just gave you a social example. We're going to actually get into our biology. And when we have no control over something that's happening in our biology, because this is even a tougher circumstance, and your body is doing certain things, you have illness or illness symptoms, judge that? Or do you use your mind to see it from an impersonal resilient state, psychological listening? We decided what would be really useful and relevant is Ellie talked about in previous episodes about this experience of inheriting the BRCA gene, where Ellie, from innate wisdom, gets her testing and learns that she now has the BRCA gene. Today, it would be most useful for her to talk about what was out of her control was how her provider talked to her and guided her, how her family and friends talked to her and responded in the best way they could about learning she had the BRCA gene.
I had a genetic counselor that was guiding me through the process, connecting me with testing resources. And so I'd met with her a few times. And so once I actually got tested for BRCA, she called me one morning with the results. And I remember like very distinctly, she started off the conversation with, "I'm really sorry. I know this isn't the news we wanted to hear, but," and then proceeded to tell me that I tested positive for BRCA. And the thing that really stuck out to me in that moment was I never told her necessarily that I wasn't hoping for a positive result. I never communicated that I did or did not want BRCA. I remember like in our first few like introductory sessions, she'd ask me like, "Are you feeling anxious? Like it's normal to feel anxious. It's normal to feel nervous." And I was just very plain with her from innate wisdom. I'm not, honestly. I'm accepting whatever it is my body has to tell me, and I'm not looking at it from a fearful lens. Instead, I'm just kind of seeing it as information about myself. And so I thought it was really interesting. And I've heard this like response too from like family and like some of the friends that I told about this. Their immediate response is to say something like, "I'm so sorry. That's really awful. That's really bad news." I feel like that definitely is a judgment that I'm experiencing about something that, like we said before, I physically could not control. It's just a fact of my body and how it was built.
Are you using your operating system any differently now as these responses are coming at you from the outside versus in the past when these kind of responses on the outside were said to you, were communicated to you? Did you use your mind any differently then?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about, there was definitely a big difference between how I approached it in the past and how I approached it this recent time around. I think like when I was younger, like as you mentioned before, like I was aware that breast cancer was a big thing in my family, understood the BRCA gene. When I was younger, like high school or so, like I would do a lot of Googling. I knew like my mother's response was to be not super comfortable with talking about it. Like she would kind of say like it's not the best thing to have happen to you and all these things about how it's like, honestly, like just put it bluntly, a cancer sentence. That was kind of the idea that I feel like I heard a lot, or at least I understood about BRCA at that time. And I do a lot of Googling, go to like random medical web forums of people talking about BRCA and talking about how it's like a guaranteed cancer risk and that it's this awful, unlucky burden that you have on yourself. And I think that's a lot of what contributed to my avoidance of the topic entirely for a lot of my life. I'm 22 right now, and that's still like young to get tested for BRCA, or at least what people say is young to get tested for BRCA. But up until this point, like I had no interest in ever like looking at that, getting that information. I would think about BRCA sometimes, like it would pop into my head and I would just drive myself into anxiety and worry and fear, make up all of these horrible like nightmares about being young and getting cancer and dying and all of this very dark stuff. But now I definitely shifted my perspective a lot. I've built up a lot of internal resilience, first of all, about not necessarily taking to heart everything that everyone says about everything.
Could we stop and look at that for a moment? When you say you've built up a lot of internal resilience, can you very simply break down what does that mean?
Yeah, honestly, it was just practicing psychological listening and just getting really comfortable with going into that instead of thinking. I think it was a process of me like recognizing and being more aware when I was going into thinking, when I was feeling darker, less light feelings, and then taking steps to psychologically listen, taking steps to just take in information, factual information.
So in your therapy, mental health counseling grounded in the 3 psychological principles, you were afforded the opportunity to be introduced to psychological listening.
Yeah.
You were afforded the opportunity to have exercises and practice it. So as you were being exposed to this knowledge, what happened inside of you regarding understanding this capability inside? Just keep it really simple.
The outside is one thing, but I think on the inside, like I feel like I've just been able to connect more with myself, like connect more with my innate wisdom and make decisions from that place. And I feel like it ultimately enables me to do more of what's right for me instead of what people tell me or like what I have believed in the past or like the fears and the anxieties that I've made up about certain things.
So is it safe to say you've experienced a lot of shifts inside your awareness
for sure.
by being exposed to psychological listening, both talking about it to understand it and practicing it? Your awareness has naturally increased about this capability, and you just more naturally do it. And that's where the more and more resilience is coming from.
Yeah, that definitely.
The other thing I ask you or point out is when you psychologically listen, does it increase how often and how easily you have realizations about psychological listening or about what's going on inside or about the topic or the live event that's going on?
Yeah, definitely. I think like I've been having a lot of realizations, I think, about BRCA since it was such like a poignant thing in my life to have to navigate. And I think like psychological listening has really helped me realize a bunch of things. To kind of lay some of them out, one of the things that I realized was that I should get tested. It makes sense. And also just realize that BRCA or not having BRCA, it's just something that is out of my control. Makes sense for me to learn about if I want to be able to take care of my body fully and more consciously. And then I was also realizing I was doing a bit more psychological listening when I was actually in my appointments with my provider. And it was more so just being able to pick up on like things that didn't necessarily make sense or things that I think I didn't just want to like take to heart. For example, she was providing me with a lot of statistics and information about other people with BRCA have done and when people normally start testing. One of the things that she said was that I don't have to worry about getting tested until I'm like 25. Tested for breast cancer, going through like mammograms and all of the more like, involved tests. And I remember like feeling kind of like a nudge inside, just kind of like a, that's interesting. I feel like there's more for me to understand about that. And so like after the appointment was over, I went through this in therapy, talked a bit about it in therapy, did some more reflection and realizing, and it started naturally coming to me. It doesn't make sense for me to get a mammogram. With this information aside, this like fact or this statistic about 25-year-olds, I was instead focusing like what makes sense for me, like what's best for me to understand about getting a mammogram. And I had like some more realizations. I hadn't been taking care of my body for my entire life. It does make sense to get a mammogram, get an understanding of where I'm at with my health right now. If I have cancer, then I find it. But if I don't, then I know how it feels when I don't have cancer.
Right. So you're pointing to something that's critically important. It sounds like this provider came more from conventional wisdom. It sounds like they came more from memory. They could have a lot of knowledge about genetics and about, what's happening with genetics, a lot of awareness about the science. But it sounds like they could have a lot more knowledge about how to use their mind consciously when they're interacting with patients. That's critically important because when we really listen, when we really ask questions, and I'm talking about psychological listening, when we really ask questions, that specific patient, what they're understanding, where they're coming from, that's when realizations can happen about what does this patient need or what is applicable in this live circumstance. It sounds like she was coming, number one, from insecurity, saying, I'm sorry we don't have the best news right now. She was coming from a lower level of awareness. She was coming from judgment, using her power thought to say the results are bad. Where psychological listening is receiving and experiencing and understanding with an open mind the actual results. Here is your provider providing you with guidance.
Yeah.
And it sounded like the guidance they gave you, which was out of your control, it could have been more helpful guidance. It could have been more from innate wisdom. But because you learned about your operating system and cultivated all this mental health, practiced psychological listening, which led to having more realizations about your operating system, about BRCA, about your body, even in that moment, when you were psychologically listening, you were having realizations what made sense for you with the BRCA gene, with how you've been taking care of your body. It came, you saw it from innate wisdom. You had a realization, spot on, fact-based level of understanding. It's wise, it's best for me to start doing the mammograms now to discern what is my current level of health in my body. What happens is we have the outside. In this case, the outside was the provider. Also, sometimes your friends and family. Sometimes it was Google. But inside, you were empowered with more awareness how you could be using your operating system more consciously in response to these things. And in many moments, it allowed you to be more resilient instead of react and pick up your power called thought and maybe go into anxiety or fear or conventional wisdom. Oh, I don't need to get a mammogram until I'm 25. It's more just like this agreed upon belief, subjective level of understanding. It's called conventional wisdom. So it's out of your control how your provider responds. It's out of your control that you have this BRCA gene. It's out of your control how your family or friends or what Google says. Mm-hmm. But you were empowered with greater levels of knowledge inside that you intentionally cultivate it, you were empowered to be psychologically independent in a very healthy, proactive, conscious way, and for you to see for yourself what is best for you to do to take care of your body and respond to your provider, which allows you to cultivate and navigate that relationship more proactively, more consciously. It allows greater relationship boundaries, because a boundary is basically an invisible thing between two people in a relationship, whether that relationship is parent-child, medical provider, patient, boyfriend, girlfriend, or boyfriend, or boss employee, or employee. These are all different types of relationships, and there's boundaries, invisible boundaries, and by understanding them at greater levels, you're more empowered. So to keep it really simple, the boundaries are my thoughts, my feelings, my experience, my perspective originates from the inside and how I'm using my operating system. The other person's thoughts, feelings, perspective, actions originates from how they're using their operating system inside. Because you understood that you have this operating system, and your level of understanding or your feelings or your actions comes from how you're using it, you were psychologically independent and resilient as your provider is from innocent judgment saying this is bad news. You were able to psychologically independently navigate that and not go into a bad insecure feeling when she's saying that. You could independently discern for yourself what to think, what to experience, what to feel, what actions to take. So it could look like so many things were out of your control, your biology, what the provider's saying, but actually from facts, you could take actions inside. You still technically had control, but control isn't even the best word for that. It's psychological independence on you proactively understanding and experiencing it, and having greater boundaries within the relationship, even with your own body. Psychologically, you see more clearly the boundaries between your physical being and understanding your physical being with your psychology. Your thoughts on what I'm saying?
Yeah, I had some things pop up while you were talking. I think one of like the conditioned habits that I navigated through during that whole BRCA situation, and one of the things that I think I have definitely noticed I've done in the past, I mean, as you were saying, it's maintaining relationship boundaries, it's respecting where people are at. I didn't judge my provider ever. Like, I was never really angry with her or angry with how people responded. I was never like, why me? Why can't they respond to this differently? Why can't they be more conscious, or whatever thoughts I could make up about that? It was really respecting them, respecting our relationship boundary, navigating my relationship with my provider more consciously. I mean, I'm sure there's like cases where it makes sense to switch your provider if there's something severe happening, but my instinct wasn't to quit or run away based on what she was saying. She's where she's at. This is what she's saying. How am I choosing to respond and view that to make a more conscious decision for myself and my health, and not focus so much on like being angry or getting frustrated or whatnot.
So to break that down just a little bit, there is always the now, the now, the now, the now. And in the now, we're always using our operating system to experience it, to respond to it, to understand it. And in the now, we really only can choose one thing in the now, whatever that one thing is. And you chose to stay focused on understanding your biology and what best next steps to take with your biology. You could have used your operating system in the now to focus on being angry with your provider, or to join your provider in feeling anxious or judging the results. To keep it simple, judgment is picking up your metaphorical magical paintbrush inside, the power called thought, and to start saying very simply, this thing that's happening is good, or this thing that's happening is bad. It's you're using the power called thought to subjectively judge the situation. The opposite of that is picking up your power called thought to understand the situation at greater and greater levels. That's what Ellie is telling you she naturally did with cultivating greater levels of mental health. Another way to say it is cultivating greater levels of consciousness through therapy, counseling, in 3 principles psychology. She was able to independently and consciously use her operating system to experience what was going on and to focus on understanding at greater levels the actual point of the live event. And that was to understand and take care of her biology, versus at a lower level of consciousness, user power thought to do something that was less relevant or was not going to be useful for her biology or taking care of it. And that is to judge the results or to judge the provider by using her power called thought and saying what the provider is saying is good or bad. In this case, being angry with the provider or reacting from being overwhelmed or taking it personally, or to judge the results of the testing, calling it good or bad. Instead, it was more like, this is the results, and reflecting and realizing, listening to innate wisdom, what are the best next steps from an objective level of understanding inside. And what we're really talking about is using the operating system. The first step is psychological listening, but to continue the steps in live time to allow a realization. And that is a leap of consciousness. That is experiencing universal facts, seeing universal facts that are originating from innate wisdom, one of our essential capabilities inside, to allow a leap of consciousness. What are best next steps to take care of my biology? It's very tailor-made for her biology, for her situation. She's being guided. She's tapping into her inner guidance system, and she's connecting with it, and she's seeing in live time, you know what? This is the right thing to do. You were using the moments in the now much more consciously to navigate it, to really stay focused on the point of it all, and to actually see from realizations, from leaps of consciousness, from that inner guidance system, what are best next steps to take care of myself. Can you simply, quickly contrast that with how you used to take care of yourself? Like, how did you used to use your operating system with lower levels of mental health?
For sure. And I think actually this kind of ties into something that I think would be cool to talk about, realizing versus believing stuff. In the past, I think I was definitely in more of belief or like blind faith kind of mindset. I would hear people say BRCA is unlucky, BRCA is this and this. I would hear like, you don't have to get tested until you're older, stuff like that. And that was choosing to believe those things, like just choosing to not really investigate them any further or understand where people were coming from when they said that.
I call that adopting other people's levels of understanding, blindly taking it on, adopting it, not using your mind consciously. And you could be adopting or believing anything. So it's more agreeing to it or It's more using your power thought to say, I believe you. That's actually a thought.
Right.
And then adopting theirs. And this is where conventional wisdom comes from. To realize it, you actually are using your operating system to experience that leap of understanding, and you see for yourself. Psychologically, you see for yourself. It just clicks. This is what I need to do. And that's really being psychologically independent, and that's taking ultimate care of yourself. You're seeing specifically for you what you need to do. And it's not a thinking thing. It's an allowing and a psychologically seeing it. So if you could please continue.
Yeah, and then versus now, since I've been on this journey of cultivating more mental health, I feel like all of my decisions about BRCA and my feelings towards it have been from realizations. Even with deciding to go to a genetic counselor, that was all from realization. It was from realizing what the role of a genetic counselor would play in my life, and that is to provide information and guidance about like the technicals and the details of getting tested. But then also realizing, we were saying, that I have this psychological independence inside to understand and look at facts about my body from a very impersonal lens.
But when you experience a realization, tell me what it feels like inside.
Yeah, it honestly just feels like it clicks inside. Instead of all this thinking and all this like busy-minded stuff where things are kind of fuzzy and I feel like I'm just like trying to force an answer out of thin air. Realizations just kind of come naturally. When I realized what to do about getting a mammogram, like that was literally just noticing a feeling and then being open and asking questions. And then through a process of like psychological listening and realizing and asking questions, clicked in my head. Just made sense. I didn't have to defend it or think about it super hard or make like a pros and cons list. Just happened.
So a realization is seeing from your authentic self, but it's also the ultimate answer. It's based on universal facts. It's the optimal solution. So when we see it, we're not confused anymore. Maybe we can go into thinking and start questioning it or doubting it, but we're back to thinking again. To be able to see those spot on universal fact, to be experiencing it in that moment, you experience clarity, that click, that lighter feeling, that beautiful, secure feeling, which is totally the opposite of when we're using our paintbrush to innocently judge something, living in that insecure feeling or being angry about it or resentful about it. That's all judgment. We're making that up. We're basically saying, for example, if it's guilt, we're basically using our paintbrush to say, I did wrong, I did bad, but it's coming from insecurity. And that insecure feeling is telling you it's subjective. Versus that realization, when that click happens inside, when that new level of consciousness happens inside, the feeling is light, the feeling is clear. And so the difference in the feeling of the dark, insecure, heavy feeling, that pressure inside, versus the feeling of that lightness and that clarity and that security, that feeling is really communicating when we're seeing from a subjective level of understanding something that we are making up inside, the opposite of facts, versus when we are actually experiencing the facts, the spot on answer, the universal facts that are coming through. It's just a really important capability to understand inside, because we just don't need to be so confused. We don't need to be blaming others. We don't need to be so angry all the time. All of that is just innocently using our operating system less consciously. It's like sometimes I've compared it to like a chainsaw, where it's like having this powerful thing. And the more knowledge you have about the chainsaw, you're going to be able to do amazing things with it. You're going to be able to do sculptures with it, build houses with it. gets somebody who's been in a crashed car, that's stuck in a car, you're going to be able to use that chainsaw to get that person out of that car. Where if you use a chainsaw, that powerful thing with lower levels of knowledge, that's where a lot of destruction happens, hurting yourself, hurting someone else, cutting down electrical wires, and everybody has no electricity or a fire starts or something like that. So that's just a metaphor for our power inside, our operating system inside. The more we invest in cultivating more mental health, we use this powerful operating system in very proactive, healthy, conscious ways, and we more easily and more naturally psychologically listen in live time. We're resilient. We more naturally look in the direction of allowing realizations versus going into believing a lot of erroneous information that actually could get us into a lot of trouble. When it can seem like things are out of our control, we have our operating system inside where we use it consciously. It makes a huge difference. Any other thoughts coming to mind about that?
Yeah,
Ellie?
especially in like a biological situation like the one that I was in, approaching things with this just lighter, more secure feeling inside, that's like the ultimate form of taking care of yourself in a lot of ways, loving yourself, because we talked about it a bit with the example of the bike and the guy in the car. And I've also experienced how much anxiety can really take a physical toll on your body. Periods of my life where I was super anxious, always on in my brain, like just always thinking, my body would suffer. I would be tense, my heart would be racing, I would be having lower quality sleep because of how much I was staying awake.
Or even about digesting your food.
Yeah, and I would get sick so much more often. I would just be physically always just in a state of like slight illness when I was getting really anxious.
Did you catch colds more easily or viruses more easily?
Definitely felt like it.
Yeah. And that is one of the amazing things I've noticed both with myself and my clients is when they start really catching on to using their mind more optimally and keep having realizations about it, they just notice more easily staying well when they would have been sick before. That's a real signal right there. The other thing I'd like to point out as you're bringing this up is that in live time, when we use our mind more consciously, we are allowing our body to be in a healthier state. So in the case with Ellie having BRCA, the BRCA gene inside, the more she uses her mind consciously, her immune system is able to function more optimally. And there's less and less of a chance that she might develop cancer just because in live time, how many moments she's allowing by using her operating system more consciously for her body to function more optimally. The other point to point out is when there are moments in time where maybe you feel some biological sensations that are communicating, oh, time to get a checkup or something's going on. Like, honestly, you could catch something faster and sooner just by listening to your body more consciously and making more conscious decisions by using your operating system more consciously. If something's going on, there's a greater chance you're going to pick it up much sooner and faster, which also increases the odds of greater biological health. The other thing I want to point out is, say at some moment in time, whether it's Ellie or someone else, all of a sudden learns they have some very serious illness inside. To be using the operating system consciously, you're going to be able to make the best decisions in your treatment, in your assessing your biology. That is also going to make another huge difference as far as what happens with your biology. Does it heal quickly? Do you get the accurate treatment or not? The other thing is in the moments while you're going through that illness, you could still be using your mind consciously where your body is able to function optimally, where you can heal more thoroughly, more quickly. So there's a lot, even when it seems like it's out of our control. whether we get diagnosed with some very serious illness, or they say there is no cure, or people around us are like responding from this innocent, judgmental, subjective level of awareness, this is bad, or whatever they might do, we still have the capability inside to independently, psychologically use our own operating system. There is things we can still do inside that are very powerful, that really make a difference. Any thoughts around that at all, Ellie?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm just kind of like thinking about a bunch of different experiences I've had in my life since being more mentally healthy. Even just like a small example, I was home with my family and everyone was sick, and reflecting on that moment, I think it was factually aware that there are people around me that were sick, but I wasn't believing that this means I have to get sick, or believing I have no control in whether I get sick or not. Part of what I was doing was like more consciously spending time outside and moving my body and staying more hydrated and noticing more if I was starting to feel symptoms. If I woke up one morning with a scratchy throat, it would take like drinking soothing tea, doing more to kind of proactively and consciously take care of my body instead of just falling into like, oh my God, like this sucks so bad. Like I hate having this symptom or whatever.
That's a great example of using your operating system to create a lot of judgmental thoughts about what's going on in your body. And the thing to understand there, while we're creating those judgmental thoughts, we're not really understanding what's going on in our body or how to take care of it. Plus, we're adding this extra duress on our body, which is a natural consequence when we start going into those insecure, judgmental thoughts. That's where our heart rate starts going up. That's where our breathing becomes more shallow. That's when our stomach starts doing twists and turns and feels really unsettled. These things might seem small. It's very consequential in our level of understanding. To say, to use our operating system to say it's bad that I'm feeling sick right now, that is a lower level of understanding. To use our operating system to just listen to what our body is expressing, that is a greater level of understanding. That's a factual level of understanding. So it's not just about living in positive feelings. It's not just about living in negative feelings. What's really important to understand is it's about the level of understanding we have inside. And that level of understanding leads to decisions and actions. And that's where some people might use the phrase, it's manifesting. It is from our level of understanding that we make decisions, that we act. That's where we're starting to manifest the level of understanding that's inside. So to have that greater level of understanding, to have that objective, fact-based level of understanding means we are doing higher quality decisions and higher quality actions, and we are actually in the process of manifesting something so much better. It's not really about the outside. It's about really what we're doing on the inside and what we're understanding about, whether it's our biology or our relationship. Anything else to add to that, Ellie?
Yeah, no, I just feel like been really interesting for me, at least personally, to like gradually learn this whole idea of things are out of your control, but that's part of life. Having a more accepting mindset to how unpredictable and how chance, or whatever you want to call it, life is. And I think it's just been a like really empowering, motivating, inspiring. Know and learn over time that like I have this capability inside that allows me to navigate and understand, and even like at times appreciate the world that I live in, and just know more consciously how to take care of myself and live in a lighter feeling. And I just think it's been really great.
So we had a whole nother part planned for this podcast, but we really kept an open mind whether to do it as the next podcast or to have a longer podcast. This podcast, Ellie and I understood the importance of what we were talking about today. So we really allowed to ourselves to be present, to really elaborate and dig into this topic. So what we're going to say to you is, in our next podcast, we're going to talk about something else that's equally as important. And that is, we are all built with psychological capabilities inside. Sometimes they're called intelligence. Sometimes they're called how smart I am, how I'm able to respond to situations, and whether it's academics, whether it's socially. So we are going to dig in the next podcast about how we're naturally built psychologically, where it can seem like we have no control. We actually, through using our mind consciously, can have greater awareness about those capabilities inside and really utilize them more fully. And this is beyond confidence. This is beyond liking ourselves, believing in ourselves. This would actually be like us understanding ourselves and really going full throttle with those capabilities that are inside. What we can call it is a greater sense of self. It's seeing oneself more and more clearly, one's authentic self, and life originating from that. Join us. Learn more fully what you're capable of and have greater levels of understanding about it, instead of maybe thinking you're not good enough. Or thank you so much for joining us today on this part 2 of judgment, things that are out of our control, how we can use our operating system to call them good or bad, or to feel like we can't do anything about it. A really enlightening conversation. I'm so glad to have this conversation with you, Ellie, and to be able to share this with our listeners. This is Faith Escudero, host of Got Your Bad podcast, all things mental health.
And I am your junior host, Ellie.
And please come back and join us to experience new levels of consciousness about your psychology inside and your capabilities. Until then.